York State. Oops, okay. Let me start again. I'm Maria Diaz. Welcome, everybody. On behalf of the New York State Language Resource Network, we'd like to welcome you. I'm welcoming you on behalf of our Executive Director, Ron Wu, and Gloria Ortiz, who is Director of Professional Development. And through their great efforts, we welcome on Saturday morning our esteemed Dr. Nancy Cloud, Professor Emerita from Rhode Island College. And we're going to continue a conversation with Dr. Cloud. Today's topic is planning responsive in person and remote instruction for the transitioning level ELLs, grades 1 through 8. So thank you, Nancy, for again sharing your expertise with us. Everybody fasten those seatbelts. You're in for a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Well, we hope so. And thank you, Maria. So we're going to get started. As you can see, our time frame today is to end at noon. And just as a bit of housekeeping, we always do take a break around 10:30, so you can count on that. And I also want to let you know, as we get started, that I will be using a model unit. If any of you were here on March 20th, when we talked about entering and emerging students in the same grade span of 1 through 8, I used 2 units, one from 2nd grade and one from 6th grade. So today, because we have a pretty wide grade span of 1 through 8, I'm going to model just in the a unit that's kind of in the middle, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But what's very important is not my model unit. What's important is for me to have a unit that I can model the strategies with, and then for you to think about how you can apply that to the units that you teach. And I'll keep trying to remind you of that. And another thing that we want to definitely do is to take a look at the ENL progressions, because we want to understand the abilities and needs of our transitioning ELLs. And I'm going to stress expressive language today, because if kids aren't speaking and if kids aren't writing, how is their language going to grow? So we really, of course, they have to receive messages in order to have something to say or something to write, but we want to concentrate on getting them talking and getting them writing. But I really want to stress the speaking. And why are we looking at transitioning at all? It's because the consultants at the Auburn have been looking at New York City data, and there's a lot of kids who are at the transitioning level, and we need to help them move forward. And definitely, there could be kids that overall are expanding, but maybe their writing is still at the transitioning level, or maybe their speaking is still at the transitioning level. So kids are not uniform across all the skills, and you know that. The core of what we're going to do today is to talk about how to plan units of instruction for transitioning students. And of course, I'm going to model with the unit that I picked out, but I don't want you, unless you're a 4th grade teacher, to be thinking about the unit that I'm showing you. I want you to be thinking about your unit, because as we plan these units, everything that I'm going to talk about in relation to the unit that I've selected to model with will equally apply to the work that you're doing with your students. And we are going to look at student work today. I'm going to start with looking at student work, and I'm going to end with all of us looking at student work. And I did try to challenge myself to create some tools that we could use to really understand what are we looking for when we look at student work. And so that's where we'll end up today. And of course, I always am trying to give you as many resources as possible as we go along that might be useful to you. So hopefully you've already gone to the Padlet. You can see that on the left. If you did not go there, you could scan the QR code and get there quickly, because it will work much better if you've downloaded all of the handouts. And we always send you a link to the PowerPoint after the PD, because I'm hoping that there are things that you will want that I've listed on the slides as tools and supports. And by getting the PowerPoint, you'll have access to all of that, the URLs and so forth. And then, because some of you are working hybrid or remote still with some of your kiddos, I will be talking about e-learning tools as we go along. And any tool that I mention, I will give you at the very end under teacher resources, I will give you links to all of those tools. But it's not just about knowing that a tool exists. It's like, how would we use these tools, right? That's what really matters. So some of you do not use Zoom, you use Google Classroom. And so just to help you out a little bit, at the top of all of your screens, we're not looking at Vanessa Simon's screen, we're looking at Antoine's screen. But at the top, up here, you should see this button for view options. And if you scroll down and you choose side-by-side mode, then my PowerPoint should be on the left and myself or whoever is speaking would be on the right without blocking any part of the slides. So this is not essential. Like if you're not following this instruction, don't worry about it. Just follow along as you've been doing. But if you would like to have an unobstructed view of the slides that I'm sharing, if you click under view options to that side-by-side mode, you'll be able to have things separated on your screen. So I hope that will be helpful. And this is the unit that I'm going to work with. I tried to pick a unit in the middle because we go all the way to 8th grade. And yet I'm very aware that those of you that are first grade teachers and second grade teachers, you're not using chapter books yet. So I will be speaking about that in a minute. I want all of you to be thinking about a unit that you do teach, because this unit is just an excuse. It's just an excuse, it's just so I can show you how I would approach any expeditionary learning Engage New York unit or Wit and Wisdom or whatever curriculum you're using. And I selected this unit because it does have a chapter book in which there are 0 pictures. It also has a speech, an excerpt from Susan Anthony's speech. It also has another nonfiction, well, it's really like a biography called The Vote. And then, so these are the 3 major texts, which I can use and would use with transitioning students, even though every single one of them is very challenging. Okay, so this is where we're headed. And as you know, we're concentrating on the middle today, on transitioning. But even though it looks like that's pretty far along, oh, gee, that kid's already at transitioning, it's not very proficient. This is what I want to convince you of. Like transitioning kids are not that far along with their English. And this stage can last a long time because there's so much that they're working on. So we should have ways when we're looking at NYSA/SLAT or NYSA/TEL, we should have ways of seeing within level growth, because the kids might stay at this level, perhaps for writing or perhaps for speaking or perhaps for listening. And maybe one skill is moving along over to expanding, or there could even be kids that are transitioning where something is lagging behind and it's still kind of at the emerging level. So we really do want to understand like where are our kids by listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And then we also want to understand that we're happy they're at transitioning, but transitioning is not super proficient. And I already told you that I'm going to concentrate on moving expressive language forward, because if you're doing all the talking and all kids get to do is listen, even if they're understanding you, that's not pushing their language as forward as getting them to speak and to write. And I really want to stress the speaking, because I think all of us get kids to write and our units get kids to write. But how about the speaking part? That is what we really want to be thinking about. And we want to say very explicitly, what exactly should I work on in speaking and writing? What should I be trying to get them to do when they're speaking and writing? And this doesn't mean I'm going to ignore this, because if I can't get language in, what are they going to speak about? Or what are they going to write about? So if they're reading or listening or viewing, they do have to receive that in order to move forward. And with the unit that I'm going to model for you, the reading is not simple, neither is the listening nor the viewing. Okay, so it's challenging. So I do have to get the receptive in, but then I want to really focus on that expressive language. So these slides, I'm hoping, will be useful to you when you're thinking about transitioning kids, because we want to say to ourselves as teachers, what are they doing now? And so this is one thing they're doing when they're speaking. They are connecting their oral language. They're not just speaking in single words and short phrases. And there is some emerging coherence and a bit of detail and clarity. They're trying to express full ideas. They are using a range of oral, remember we're talking about speaking, phrase and sentence patterns and grammatical structures, and they're producing simple and some expanded sentences. Remember, an expanded sentence is one that contains adjectives and adverbs and prepositional phrases, but otherwise it's still a simple sentence. And then they do use some specific and some technical content area words and expressions, and they do use some multiple meaning words, and they might use some common idioms. So we will hear this, and sometimes they pick up that language quickly because they're listening to their peers. And this is the part I want you to notice. Their language is just generally controlled. It's not controlled 100%. It's just generally controlled. We're getting the idea of their message, and they are getting their message across in a fairly fluid way. But I want you to notice the second part, there's still errors in their words and their grammatical structures. And so this doesn't mean that what we should be about is correction. What we should be about is expansion and teaching them things about how English works. So when we see an error, what we should be saying to ourselves is, oh, they need help with that. They don't understand how English works. Let me teach them. An error is a cue to the teacher that you need to teach some, to have a mini lesson on something, okay, whether spoken or written. And these are the things we would want to work on in speaking with our transitioning kids. We want them to start using specific words. So in this unit, it talks about Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And I don't want them to say, you know, that lady we've been talking about. I want them to say Elizabeth Cady Stanton. I want them to say suffragette. I want them to say women's movement. I don't want them to say all those things they were doing and keep going with filler words and everyday language. And I want them to start to have a range of vocabulary, not just one word for something, but several words. So that means I have to start working on synonyms and offering them multiple terms so they have some variety in their vocabulary. And then I want them to use the specific word. If I'm looking for 19th Amendment, I don't want them to say they passed a law. I want them to say the 19th Amendment. And also, I want to see in their sentence level more sentence variety, a range of sentence patterns, longer and more complex sentences. I want them to start their sentences in different ways. And I especially want them to start to feel confident and more fluent. So I want them, I'm behind them 1,000,000%. I'm trying to support them and make them feel successful. And so these are kind of my marching orders when they're speaking. But I do want to mention that when we give kids feedback, and the younger the child, the more this is true, when we give them feedback when they're speaking, they don't capture it as well as when we give them feedback when they're writing. And this is because they're concentrating on the ideas that they're trying to get across and not the way they're saying it. So for just a simple one, if they were to say the woman's marched for their rights, and I say, oh, the women marched for their rights, they're going to just say, yeah, the woman's marched for their rights. They're not going to hear necessarily the correction. And so this is where if we do want to work on spoken language, then we need to say to them, oh, I heard you say X, let me show you how that works in English. And I would write it down so we can look at it. Okay, but I can only stop so much when they're talking. Otherwise, I'm interrupting. That they're trying to express things to me, and I definitely want to hear what they're saying to me. So better to take notes and to work on this with everyone that's at the transitioning level through a mini lesson and say, I've heard a lot of you say this, and let me show you something about English works, etc. So writing is a better time to work on language production because they can see what they've written and so can we. And so it's easier to work on. But it doesn't mean I can't work on spoken language. I can, but it's just a little more fleeting, right? Like after they've said their thought, they may not remember how they said it. So when I look at their writing, this is what I'm going to see in transitioning kids, some short and expanded sentences with emerging complexity. They're going to express a limited number of related ideas. They're going to use repetitive grammatical structures. And this is kind of the hallmark of this stage, that they keep using the same verbs, the same tenses, the same verb tenses, the same sentence construction patterns. This is very typical of transitioning. They're relying on their go-to verbs and their go-to nouns and their go-to sentence patterns. And they will use, though, some specific content language, but sometimes they may write as they speak with everyday language rather than using more academic or formal modes of expression. Now, those of you who work at the first grade and second grade, the kids at that age are going to write as they speak because they feel like they're talking to you when they're writing. And in general, when we have English learners that we're working with, they feel connected with us and they do write to us as if they're speaking to us. But once we get them in first and second grade, we have to start making that shift over to more academic and formal modes of expression, of course, as it's appropriate for the grade level. So when we're working on writing, for word choice, we want to work on very vivid verbs, specific action verbs, not go, have, want, but rather other verbs that are more evolved, right? So we want to start saying those verbs are really tired. You keep saying, I am, he is, we go, he has. They're exhausted. Let's find some other verbs that we could use instead of those. And they may not be adding any adjectives. Definitely, they're probably not using very many adverbs. And so we want to work, we have a lot to do on the word level, and we have to tackle this with them one by one. We also want to get more sentence variety. We want them to start sentences in different ways. We want them to use clauses in the initial, medial, and final position so that they're writing complex sentences. That's the next move, as are compound and complex sentences, and to start to use relative clauses. Okay, so this is what I'm after. And so I'm hoping these slides will be useful to you. So when you're working with a transitioning kid, you can say, oh, what can I work on? And then you can look at this and it can be a reminder. So to challenge myself, I actually bothered some teachers here in Rhode Island because I wanted to look at some student work. And this is the work once kids get to transitioning, because when they're entering and emerging, there's not a lot of language to look at. It doesn't mean we can't look at it, we can, but there's more to look at when they get to transitioning, and I should be looking at student work all the time. So I collected and studied some samples of transitioning kids so that I could identify together with you today some language targets. What would be good work to do with transitioning kids? What do they need help with? And because we know that transitioning kids need supported reading, they need pictures, they need audio, they need to have it be read aloud to them as they follow along when they're reading. They need that layered input. I tried to give them layered input. So what I did was, this was not part of the reading. I created a cover page where I showed them who Elizabeth Cody Stanton was and who Susan B. Anthony was. And then I read aloud the whole reading that you'll see in a minute. And so I'm going to show you that I did that on technology called Vocaroo. And Vocaroo is as simple as you can make it. For recording, it only does audio. But when you go to Vocaroo, the only thing you have to do is click on the red button and it starts recording. And then you click on the red button again and it stops recording. And then once you've stopped recording, if you liked your recording, it offers you all these ways to share the recording. I can download it, I can embed it in a PowerPoint, I can get a QR code for it, or I could get a link and send a link. So you can record for students and they can record for you. And so Vocaroo is a very, very simple tool. Any child of any age would be able to use this, and you'll be able to use it as well. And so this was the reading. This is a reading from the unit. This is a kind of a biography of Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And I'm going to start it right here, just so that you can get a sense of it, so that when you see the language samples that I collected, they'll make sense to you. Like, why were the kids writing about that? To homeschool all 8 of his children. When Susan grew up, she became a teacher. It was one of the few occupations women were allowed to pursue. Susan taught for several years, but then had to go home and help her family take care of their farm. When she did venture from home again, it was to meet a woman many people were talking about, Elizabeth Cady Stanton. She was very involved in the fight for women's rights, but men felt that she was just stirring up trouble. However, Susan very much wanted to meet her, and she did. In 1872, Susan and several other women tried to vote in their hometown and were quickly arrested. But nothing could stop Susan Anthony or Elizabeth Stanton and so many others. It was a cause worth fighting for. More than 40 years later, women picketed outside the White House asking President Wilson to pass an amendment to give all people the right to vote. On this day, November 14, 1917, many of the women peacefully picketing were injured by soldiers and violence broke out. The women were once again arrested. But as the country began to hear about the terrible unrest in the country, there were signs of real change. Susan Anthony and Elizabeth Stanton kept up the fight for women's rights for more than 60 years. One of the last things Susan said in a speech was, "Failure is impossible." And she was right. Although Susan died in 1906, 14 years before the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution gave women the right to vote, her work was not in vain. On August 26, 1920, 20 million women finally won the right to vote. So when you are old enough, remember to vote. Remember Susan B. Anthony and all the other women of courage who fought to make it possible. Okay, so they had access, it was 2 pages of reading. This was the reading that they were given. This is part of the unit. It's a 4th grade text. And they had the audio. Hopefully, no matter what you think of the audio, I was trying to read at a good rate for transitioning kids, which means slowly, but still naturally. I was also trying to read with expression, so they would get the idea from my voice. And they could read this as many times as they wanted. We didn't stop them, and they could listen to it as many times as they wanted. But we didn't change the text in any way for them. We asked them to read this text and then to write a little summary of it. So that was the task. And one thing I want to remind you when you collect samples, and hopefully you're collecting lots of samples of your kids, don't get lost in the content when you're looking for language targets, because in a way, the content doesn't matter. So even if they told me all wrong facts, or if there was so much more that they could have captured and they didn't capture it, I don't care. I'm looking at what they did right, and I'm trying to find in what they wrote some good language proficiency targets. And again, it's not about correcting surface errors. It's about giving them strategies. It's teaching them things about English. So I'm looking for language teaching targets in their writing because I'm trying to propel their proficiency forward. And so one question I might ask myself is, are they writing in academic ways, or does it sound like they're speaking to me? What expressive language needs do they have? What are they trying to do? But it's obvious they need help with, because they're not fully forming it the way that you need to in English. But this one's tougher because I also have to notice what they never do. Do they use adjectives? No, they never use adjectives. Do they use introductory clauses? No, they never use introductory clauses. So I need to notice that as well. And at the very end today, I'm going to give you a checklist. I collected about 10 to 12 samples, and then I saw what was common across all the transitioning kids. And so at the end, and it was already, you might have seen it on the Padlet, I created a little checklist that we can use to try to see the most common things that transitioning kids need help with. So I'm going to give you a minute to take a look at, this is a 4th grade Spanish speaker. I'm telling you she's the Spanish speaker because you could see transfer errors from Spanish to English. So I want to give you a minute to read what she wrote, and then I'm going to show you the kinds of things that I noticed she was doing and needs help with.
Mhm.
Okay, so one thing I want to stress again is I don't care about surface errors. I don't care if they capitalized where they needed to. I'm looking at their language, imagining, that they're speaking to me, or what do they need help with when they're writing. And remember that mechanics, spelling and capitalization, that's editing. And we shouldn't be working on editing before we help them express their ideas. Okay, we should be working on the expression of ideas first and foremost. But one thing I did notice is, and you could say, well, isn't that punctuation? She was not separating her sentences clearly for the reader. So I want to show her, hey, you can't just write continuously. You have to show me where one idea ends and the next idea starts so I can really capture your points. And I would never talk about periods and capitals. I would just talk about separating your ideas. Okay. Another thing I noticed was that mostly she was saying women, but once she said a woman. So she does need help with irregular plurals. And this is common for transitioning kids. But mostly I felt like she really needs to expand her vocabulary and phrasing. And you can notice here, because I boxed it, she's mostly saying women, 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 men, women, women, vote, vote, women, men, and a few names of people. So she was not really grabbing all of the vocabulary that was given to her in the reading, like leaders or suffragettes. She never referred to the women any other way than women. So she doesn't have another word. And so this is where I want to show her how to use a reading to grab some words and use it when you're writing. She also didn't modify. She didn't use adjectives and adverbs very much. Well, she says one day and two women. But other than that, she's not really modifying. She wasn't saying courageous women or peacefully picketed. So this is somewhere I can go with her. Okay, let's look at another sample. So let you read this. This is an Arabic speaking 4th grade boy. And I added because I wasn't sure if you'd be able to decipher his handwriting. Okay, so just with this second sample, you can see like the first sample that we looked at, and that was a Spanish speaking child, with this Arabic speaker, he is also not showing the reader where sentences start and end. And you didn't get to see all the samples that I did, but this was really common, that the kids were not marking their different ideas. And this is a nice little mini lesson, isn't it? It's an easy thing to show them. And I mean, we certainly can mention about capitals and periods, but that's not the important thing. The important thing is, how's a reader supposed to follow that? Here he does put a capital, right? So, but he's not always marking his sentences. And down here, the cops got them, another capital. So he's a little bit got the idea, but not really. There were a lot of simple verbs and, again, repetitive vocabulary. This is typical of transitioning kids. This kid was trying to use embedded speech. They said to the president, "Can you let women vote?" He said no. Okay, so, and embedded speech was actually modeled in the reading. So I can go back to the reading and show that strategy. He needs help with natural phrasing in English. This is tougher to teach because this has to do with word choice, but I think most of us that are proficient in English would say give a speech, not said a speech. That shows that he's relying on the verb say and said. And word choice, he says cops, an everyday word instead of police. And he says prison, different. I think most of us would say and put them in jail, not put them in prison, but it's a correct thought, but it's just, I think as proficient speakers, we would choose different words. That is not as important. This is not as important as everything else on this list. He's trying, when you get down here, after a few days or years, comma, he's trying to do complex sentence construction, and he's trying to use different conjunctions and relative clauses. So he's on the verge of doing that, but he needs help with that. And definitely, just like our first little girl, he needs to expand his vocabulary. Instead of the cops got them, the cops arrested them, and use more modifiers like courageous women and so forth. So I don't want to get lost in these samples, but I was trying to prove to you at the very beginning that looking at student samples gives us clues of what we should be working on. And we shouldn't just work on correcting what they are writing. We should be seeing what we need to help them with. And we will come back to this as we go along. So collecting writing samples and spoken samples can help us see what our learners need help with. Writing is easier to study than speaking, but both are possible. I can record them speaking, and then I can see what they're doing and not doing and try to give them feedback. I could play it back to them and show them what they said, but I think it's easier to work on written language when you're trying to give feedback and push language forward, because everyone can see what the kids are doing. And I really want to stress, because I gave you so many things with those two samples that we could work on, that we should target only one area at a time, and the area that we think will make the biggest difference in their writing. So with both of those kids, I would start with separating their ideas. Then I might go to adding modifiers or choosing different verbs, but you're going to be making those decisions. So to not forget about the receptive language, let's look at what transitioning readers can do. They can make sense of simple text. They can decode familiar text. But the text that I showed you and that I used with those kids to collect the sample was neither simple nor familiar. And they also use their background knowledge. So you could say, well, what do fourth graders in classrooms today know about the suffragette movement? Not much. And we didn't do anything. I wouldn't let the teachers do anything to help the kids know more about that time in history, because I wanted it to be more like what happens to them when they take the statewide assessments. They can read and comprehend key ideas if it's in accessible resources. So this means we have to add some accessible resources to the units that we teach. And we also need to provide visual and auditory support, because they do need visual and other clues. So I wanted to show you two books that might be useful to you as you're studying kids at different proficiency levels. One is by Andrea Honigspeld, and you may know Andrea because she's at Malloy College out on Long Island. It's a lovely book. It's for grades K-8, so it's right on target for all of you today, on growing language and literacy. And she goes stage by stage saying what we should be working on with kids. So that's really worth it for summer reading. And this is another one called Differentiating Instruction and Assessment for English Language Learners. And this is for K-12. And likewise, it goes stage by stage and skill by skill. What do they need help with on speaking, on reading, on writing, on listening? So transitioning readers needs sensory support in every lesson. They need us to teach them complex content and academic vocabulary and sentence structures before they enter text or while they're in the text as mentor text, and I'll be modeling this. And they need us to lay a foundation by building background, give them high quality, age appropriate, lower reading level books aligned with our curriculum. We should engage in shared and guided reading and offer them lots of thinking maps, graphic organizers, templates, and so forth to gather information as they read. And so to not forget about listening, on the left, you can see all the things that transitioning kids can do. And on the right are the things we want to help them do. So we want to help them listen successfully to increasingly complex language and keep paraphrasing for them to facilitate their comprehension. We want to pre-teach that new vocabulary. I know all of you are doing that. This is an important reminder to give them wait time, to take pauses as they're listening. We can always stop an audio or a video so that they can listen again, or we just pause and allow them to process what they just listened to. And then we want to always offer them support so they can capture what they're listening to. So now let's dig into our unit and let's see what we should be doing as we plan our units for transitioning students. Remember, I'm going to keep modeling with this fourth grade unit, but I want you to think about your grade level units and to look at your texts and how accessible they are for transitioning students. So one of the things we always want to know is the readability that's already been computed for our text. These don't always agree, by the way. The Lexile doesn't always agree with the guided reading level or the grade level. So we kind of have to use all of them to get a sense of where the book is at. But I did want to show you, this is what the text looks like when you open it up. And I've highlighted some things on this page if you want to look at this to give you some clues of what challenges do you see in the text for transitioning kids. No pictures, no support. And if you don't want to be guided by what I've highlighted, you can look at this paragraph over here. And all I want you to do is for each of you to just think now, what challenges do you see in this text for transitioning ELLs, knowing that they need support when they're reading and it needs to be familiar and they need to have been pre-taught some concepts and vocabulary. So if they were reading this alone, what challenges do you see for them? Okay, so these are some of the ones that I think we all saw. There's a lot of unknown words, right? Muddy banks and brim of a hat and convenient and serviceable, artificial, violets, petticoats, satin, smokestacks, many, many, many unknown words. And so as kids are reading, they're like bumping into all these words that they don't know, and we can't teach them all. You're not going to stop and teach all these words. So one of the things we have to work on with transitioning kids is getting past all these words. And also we need to go through the text a little differently with them as their teachers. I would use this text, but we'll talk about how I would use it in a second. I also would never want to start reading this chapter until I start to teach them some of the most important background. And it's not important about sashes and ribbons and petticoats. That's not important to the story. This story is about the suffragette movement and women getting the right to vote. So I don't need to get lost in stockings and bloomers and so forth. But I might need to help them understand about the Susquehanna River because she goes there throughout this chapter. I need them to know it's in Pennsylvania. A lot of your kids won't know where Pennsylvania is. So, I have to make these hard choices. What should I pre-teach to get them ready for this? And you want to concentrate on the gist of the story, getting them ready for the gist of the story, which is in this chapter, since most of you probably don't know this book, her mother prevents her. Violet is a child who is prevented by her mother from getting letters that her sister wrote to her after she leaves home. And Violet's really mad in this chapter that her mother never gave her the letters. And now it causes Violet to want to go and find her sister. So I would want to teach letters, and maybe I need to teach thrown in the river because that's what her mother told her she did with the letters. But some of the other things are of lesser importance. Okay, so I have to make all those choices as to what I'm going to pre-teach and what I'm just going to let go over their heads. They're never going to get it, but it's okay. They don't need to know about sashes and ribbons to get the gist of this story. We need to see the demands of our unit texts, whether they're narrative or informational, and it goes beyond Lexile. We also need to see the proficiency demands of the text, which is somewhat different because it comes down to this background knowledge and words they don't know and phrasing they don't know. And that's not necessarily a part of Lexile. So I do want to know the Lexile because for fourth graders, by the end of the year, I expect them to read at least around the 800 level. And so this book is where I need to see them by the end of the year, which is why I'm going to try to access at least parts of this book with my transitioning kids. But then I need to say, well, what else do I need to add to this unit? Because this is really beyond where transitioning kids are right now. As it turns out, they did give me the Lexile for the Susan B. Anthony speech, but they didn't give me the Lexile for the vote. So I want to show all of you that if you're not aware of this, that you can go to lexile.com/analyzer. And as long as you're willing to type or copy and paste, you can enter words and it will compute a Lexile for you. If you want the free version, it will only give you 250 words. So what I do is I enter like 500 words, but it means I have to do it in 2 lots. And then I see what the first 250 words came up as in terms of the Lexile. Then I throw some more words in and see what it comes up, and then I average it. But you can determine the Lexile level of any text, and this would work also for websites, which never tell you the Lexile. And you do want to know this. You want to know, where is this? How far away is this from where kids are right now? I also put the women's right to suffrage in again, because I just wanted to see how accurate it was. And it was pretty accurate. But the Lexile that I got was a wider range. This made it look a tiny bit lower than actually parts of it are. But it's a good thing to do to find the Lexile level. But I also want to know the proficiency level, right? So that means I have to stare with my eyes to see the challenges for ELLs. But now, never mind that I'm going to keep showing you this unit. I want you to think about an ELA unit that you teach that involves challenging text. What's that? It's grade level texts that are in your units that you're supposed to be using, in which transitioning students are going to need support. You know it. So whatever grade level you're working at, I want you to think of a unit with on grade level chapter books or fiction or nonfiction text, maybe some picture books, but they're challenging for your students. And I did want to mention that in Wit and Wisdom, there's a second grade unit on civil rights and civil rights heroes, and it has 3 books on suffragettes. They're picture books. It's 2 friends, Susan B. Anthony and Frederick Douglass, I'll get it out, and Hearts on Fire. They're both picture books, but they do have to do with this. So even in second grade, you could have these challenging themes and topics. And starting in third grade, every grade level starts to have chapter books. So whatever grade level you're in, I want you to think about the challenges for your students. And I did want to help those of you that are first grade to say that in grade 1, module 2, which is What's Up in the Sky, these 3 books are very challenging. They would be challenging, never mind their picture books. They would be challenging for transitioning students. The language is challenging. So trust me, all of you have challenging books, and no matter your grade level. And what all of us should be doing is studying the unit to determine the text type. Is it fiction? Is it nonfiction? Is there a speech? Is there a play? Is it a novel? Is it a chapter book? And then I want to know the levels. I want to know those Lexile levels or guided reading levels or grade levels, but I also want to see the proficiency demands. And that's where I start. Then I look at the objectives and the standards for the unit, and those are non-negotiable. I want to work on the same objectives and the same standards, but I might go about it a little bit differently. I want my kids, my transitioning kids, to be able to answer the same guiding questions by the end of the unit. Remember, these are not short units. These are 8-week units, most of them. And then I also want to work on the primary skills that the unit was designed to work on. So these are some of the things that my unit was designed to work on. And I have no problem working on this with transitioning kids. So I'm fine with all of this. But I do want to add some additional level appropriate second language materials. And occasionally I might use the L1 because that's in the progressions, that we can still use the native language with transitioning students. After transitioning students, we're supposed to cut that out. And with transitioning students, when we're in ENL now, we're not against native language, but in ENL, where the goal is to help them with their English. So I should only occasionally, with transitioning students, use some native language for support. And then I definitely want to practice the same skills. And I want to definitely try to use as many of the key unit texts as I possibly can, offering kids support. So in this unit, this is non-negotiable. My guiding questions, and these are not that important, but this is what happens in this unit. Okay, and you can look at them on the screen. And then I wanted you to know that this chapter book is historical fiction. It is fiction, but it's historical fiction. And in the back of the book, it offers period photographs and historical notes that I could go to first. And it is also in the New York State curriculum in the 4th grade for social studies to work on this. So, and the ones that are in bold appear in this fictional novel. And then you could see that the other texts that we've taken a look at involve Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. So across the things that they're reading, they are learning about these figures and they are learning about this movement. And the guiding question is, can one person take action that can make a difference? And what happened with the 19th Amendment and so forth. So, these were the things direct from the unit that I should be working on. I should be working on character actions and how that shows evidence of themes. I should be teaching relative pronouns and relative adverbs. And guess what? That's good to work on with transitioning kids. I should make sure kids can summarize the events that show the theme. And I do want them to do some writing. And then these were the reading objectives. And I have no problem working on these reading objectives, even if I select and use different texts. So as much of the unit as I can hold on to with my transitioning kids, and also for your entering and emerging kids, we want to hold on to the goals of the unit and the intention of the unit, even where we do things differently in how we go about it with our transitioning kids. So all of us are well aware that we need to build background. And I wanted to show you some level appropriate things that I could use. And always, in order to respond to my students and to make it as culturally responsive as possible, I do want to choose appropriate text and multimedia that in the L1 and in the L2 that I think my students will relate to. And so I know that a lot of you do speak Spanish, and I'll just show a minute or two of this in Spanish. But those of you that do not speak Spanish, I want you to notice from the images that this was not just teaching about the women's movement in the US, this was teaching about the women's movement globally, which it was big in Russia, in China, in other places. This didn't just happen in the US, and it happened in Latin America too. So I'll just play a minute or two so you could get an idea of where I might start with my Spanish speaking kids.
Mujeres Construyendo Historia informa.
Si la mujer trabajaba y aportaba a la economía de cada nación, ¿por qué no iba a tener derecho a elegir a sus gobernantes? Con esta premisa, comenzó en el siglo XVIII la lucha por el derecho al voto femenino. La lucha por los derechos políticos de las mujeres surgió en Francia durante la Revolución de 1789. En ese entonces, Olympe de Gouges publicó la Declaración de los Derechos de la Mujer y de la Ciudadana, en la que reclamaba los mismos derechos políticos que disfrutaban los hombres. En 1848 se realizó en Estados Unidos la Convención de Seneca Falls, en la que además de reclamar la igualdad de género, se defendía el acceso de las mujeres al derecho de votar.
Okay, so in that last little picture that we saw, you can see why this is so studied in New York, because it happened a lot in New York. And there you can see all of our main characters that come up in the story. But for those of you that don't speak Spanish, remember that with video, you can always turn the sound off and you can narrate yourself. So I could narrate this in whatever language I want: Haitian Creole, Arabic, Urdu, Russian, Chinese. I don't have to, so if I find a good video and I like what it's showing, I can share it my own way. And if I use Edpuzzle or something like that, or Nearpod, I can also make a new recording. I can layer in a new audio track. But I would also look for home language texts. And I will say that I was more successful doing this with Spanish because the publishers know they can sell books. Like Spanish is like 74% of our ELLs speak Spanish. So they know they can sell a lot of books if they publish them in Spanish, and fewer if they publish them in Russian or Urdu or Haitian Creole. So sometimes it's harder to find the native language material when it's a really US topic like this one is. Like, why would there be books about Susan Anthony in Russian? Okay, there might not be. So, but I did want you to know that this book is a really great book if your kids do speak Spanish, to learn about the whole movement. And I don't have to do anything with this at school, but I could let them have it at home so that they maybe even together with their family could learn something about this very important period in US history. I did try, though. I want you to know I always try to see if I can find things in other languages. I was not very successful because I don't speak these languages. I tried in Urdu, I tried in Arabic, I tried in Haitian Creole. And I think I found some things in Chinese and in Russian, but check me out always. But I would urge all of you that do speak those languages to try to find the material in your kids' native languages to give them like a backdrop about this period. And I really like this one because this was about a Chinese American woman here in the US who helped shape the suffrage movement. So I would want my Chinese kids to know that there was like a really important Chinese female who was very, very active in the movement. I wouldn't just want them to think it was all Susan B. Anthony. And then here, I believe this is a translation, but it seemed pretty good, and check me out. And likewise, I found a sample video in Russian that looked pretty good from the visuals that I was seeing, but I don't know what they were saying. And also I found this, which was how Russian women won the right to vote. And that could be an important way in. But down here for all of you, I found a lot of interesting places, websites you can go about how women got the right to vote around the world. And these go country by country by country. So I might just concentrate on the countries my kids are from and then start that way to show them, gee, this was an international movement. And then if I go to a children's site like National Geographic for Kids, I could just take the visuals from there, and then I could use those visuals in any language. So never give up trying to find things that you could use with your kids through translanguaging or native language support. But overall, and I made this range up. In my mind, as an ELL teacher, I would try to target books. These are transitioning kids. I would try to be in the 500 to 800 Lexile range, because if you look at it, that's second grade and third grade by the end of the year. So that's 2 grade levels below. So I would like to be in the 500 to 800 Lexile level with the kids, because I'm trying to get them by the end of the year at least to around 800, 850, which is the 50th percentile of where I want kids by the end of the year. So always bear that in mind. This chart that I'm showing you is where we want them by the end of the year, not where they are at the start of the year. And also, I want you to notice that in the early grades, those of you in the early grades, wow, they really expect your kids to jump a lot of Lexiles in the early grades, hundreds of Lexiles. And then look how it slows down. In the later grades, like 6th grade, it only goes up like 100, 60. It's hardly going up. So if we can get kids at least by 8th grade, if we can get them anywhere close to 1,000, they're pretty good. So just remember that, like when you look at these Lexiles, they're very ambitious in the early grades, and then it slows way down. So we have more chance to get kids to the grade level expectations. So these are the books that I would add. I would add picture books. You can see they're in my range of the 500 to 800. I'm trying to get as high up as I can and still have it make sense. And these have pictures throughout. I also found a picture book about Elizabeth Cady Stanton. You can see it uses period illustrations, but it's in my range. I'm trying to get them up there. And I would add all of these texts because I need the picture support, and it's not in the novel. I could also add these 2 books about how women won the right to vote. And there is a little YouTube video that talks about this book. So I gave you the link to that up there. And also I would go on to Edpuzzle. I hope all of you are aware of Edpuzzle. It's free. I would go to Edpuzzle and I could type in the names of those figures in history and see if there are any videos that teachers already put up. And then I can listen to them and decide if they're appropriate for my transitioning kids. But if they're not appropriate, I can shorten them, I can re-record, or I could add notes. Like, let's say I like a video, I like this video, but I don't like the way it's too fast, it's too long. I can change that. And I'm going to show you that in a minute. But with Edpuzzle, they can check on comprehension. This one has 7 comprehension questions. This one has 12. That's too many. This one has 14. Oh my. That means we're stopping them all the time to ask them questions. So I do want to check on comprehension, but I don't want to overwhelm them with too much checking. So one of the other things that I want to work on is for them to recognize names of characters. Will they recognize Violet as the name of someone, or Myrtle or Chloe? I might have to teach them about foster care and orphanages and food lines and soup kitchens, locations in Michigan, because that's where a lot happens. The northern climate, the cultural reference. Well, you know what? I'm seeing that some of these are from the, I'm so sorry. I'm seeing that some of these are from the last unit. I don't know what happened here. I apologize. The location is not Michigan. The location is Tennessee and Pennsylvania. It is a northern climate, but these don't happen in the story. There is a lot on railroad transportation and freight. She rides the train to get there. There are some cultural reference, like you saw, not about sheds and so forth. I am really apologize. This is from the last time, and I must not have saved after I changed it. And so we want to get into all of this, okay? So when I'm supporting kids in the unit, one of the things that I can do is I can offer them summaries as previews. So before they read chapter 1, they can read a preview which tells them what happens in the chapter, which should improve their reading as they go along in the chapter. And then I can do the same in chapter 2 and so forth. Any type of preview that I can offer is helpful. So now I want to show you how I can customize a video if I like a video in Edpuzzle.
Ever wish you could make a video more relatable to students? You know, just play director so that the video was more relevant to them? Edpuzzle allows you to do just that, giving you the advantage of customizing and personalizing videos to promote active viewing. This free web-based tool allows you to crop, annotate, and remix online videos, whether they're for flipped learning, for independent viewing, or for whole group instruction. First, upload your own video or choose from their vast and vetted library. Then have at it. You can crop and splice together the parts of the video you want your students to focus on. Now let's say you just want to reinforce a key point or further explain an idea. Just add your own voice into the mix with audio notes and voiceovers. Check for understanding and get formative feedback by adding polls or multiple choice questions throughout the video. Give visual cues by adding relevant images. Make a cross-curricular connection by linking to related web content. Draw students in deeper with higher order thinking by asking them to make predictions or add their perspectives by embedding questions. For the optimal viewing experience, Edpuzzle allows you to design customized guidance and support for your students. Other excellent video annotation platforms that support active viewing include Zaption, Educanon, and Vialogs. You know your students and their needs the best. With you in the director's chair, make your students star viewers by personalizing and differentiating videos in just a few clicks.
Okay, so as she's mentioning, I can take the same video and if I'm willing to do a new recording for kids at different levels, I can have different audio tracks. And so in Edpuzzle, and this is why I'm showing it to you, often a book that you're teaching is already there. A teacher, think about all the teachers that are using expeditionary learning or wit and wisdom across the United States. That's a lot of teachers. And chances are very high in Edpuzzle, you're going to find that somebody's already read a whole chapter in there. And so here, what I liked about how this teacher adapted it was she had the original chapter, but then she paused it after several pages and she would write a quick summary of what happened. Like maybe they would read 4 pages and then she added a note and the note would say what happened so that she could be sure that kids were understanding the most important things. This she wrote in a way that she thought her students would understand it. And so these don't have to take a long time. I know it could feel to you like, oh, gee, who has time for that? It doesn't take a long time. It just takes minutes if something's already there. And your students will really appreciate it. And even if you can't do it for every chapter, if you do it for any chapter, it's a help to your students. So this was, I wanted to show you this because I thought it was really nice. So you could re-record in a slower mode, then you could stop it at certain points, you could write summaries in the notes, and then the kids would have to click to continue. But notice if they weren't understanding, they could rewatch, they could listen to that same part again. So especially for remote teaching, I think Edpuzzle has a lot of advantages for you when you're working with English learners. And one is you don't have to recreate the wheel. Chances are very high that if it's a unit from a curriculum that a lot of teachers are using, chances are high some teacher already did the work for you. Also with the Hope Chest, and this was done by a New York State teacher, this teacher recorded every single chapter as an audio chapter. And also I found it on Audio Bookstore and Audible and so forth. They're usually with these chapter books, especially if they are in a curriculum like Engage New York or like Wit and Wisdom, chances are high that they've created an audio version. And this is very helpful to English learners to be able to hear the chapter as they're reading it. If it's too long and I just want to read an excerpt, let's say that there's a part of a chapter that I really want them to understand. We're not going to read the whole chapter, but only want them to read a section. Then I can cut these. There's a lot of these online cutters, audio cutters. It's free, it's online. You just have to drag over the audio file and then you can cut it any way you want. And it's very simple, or I wouldn't be able to do it. And I do it easily. So remember that some of your chapters or sections of chapters could be used to work exclusively on listening comprehension. You might never have them read it. You might just have them listen, but you have to make sure it's supported and that they will be able to understand it. So another thing that I could do is look for book trailers, which are previews or summaries or read aloud videos or book reviews. And so I wanted to show you this one that was developed by some fourth grade students, because I could have kids listen to this before they read or after they read or while they're reading. I'm deciding when I might send them here to listen to this, but I wanted you to see that you also could ask your kids to create a book review or a chapter review. Never mind, this is about the Hope Chest. Think about your unit. How could I do this with my unit?
We read The Hope Chest by Karen Schwabeck.
In 1917, a girl named Violet ran away from home to find her sister, Chloe. Chloe was kicked out for her beliefs about women's rights 3 years ago. Along the way, she met some friends that helped her find her sister. Their names were Myrtle, Mr. Martin, and Hobie. They helped Violet get to Nashville where her sister was. There were two parties of the women's rights movements, the subs and the antis. The subs want women's rights, such as voting. The antis think women should not have more rights than getting married. Violet is a sub but becomes an anti-spy.
What are the antis planning, and will Violet get caught? Do the antis have secrets? Do the subs or antis win their rights?
My favorite part is when Violet drives around looking for Mr. Credwell because he tried to run away so he would not have to vote.
My favorite part is when Violet offends a lady, but does not mean to. It shows that she is more confident and outgoing than she was in the beginning. If you like historical fiction and adventure, then you should read The Hope Chest by Karen Schwabeck.
Okay, so I took the time to show you that, and obviously those were two native speaking kids, so they didn't have any trouble saying the things that they wanted to say, but hopefully it was also obvious to you that they practiced. And this is a good thing to work on. You saw that I could do this, and I could do this definitely. I wouldn't see their faces, but I could do an audio recording with Vocaroo, and we'll see in Nearpod and Seesaw and Flipgrid and even on Google Classroom, we can have kids give a book review, and then they will practice many times to say what they want to say. And it could just be about whatever you ask it to be about, right? So with whatever books you're having the kids read that are part of your unit, you could ask them to do a book review, or you could ask them to do a read aloud, or you could ask them to do a trailer, which is just trying to interest other kids in reading the book. But so you can use it to give input, but you can also use it to get output. So you can use these for listening and for speaking practice. Another tool that I can go to is the Prezi site. And when I searched for the Hope Chest, I found more than 1,000 Prezis that were up there. And I can't look at all 1,000, but I can see what they were designed to work on. And if it were me, I would be looking for ones that summarize particular chapters so that I might go to a Prezi and use the Prezi instead of read the chapter, because I can't get through this book as quickly with transitioning kids as I can with native speakers. So I need some accelerating means. I need a way to get through some of the chapters with summaries, with Prezis, with chapter reviews, we're not going to read certain chapters. Maybe I'll choose like 5 chapters that we are going to read and we're going to work very intensively with. But then I have to have a way to get through the whole novel. And I can do that if I have these other tools. So I can look for prezzies that help identify the settings, the themes, talk about the characters, or summarize chapters, or summarize the whole novel. So just remember with your books to always go and see if some teachers or some kids have already created prezzies about the books that you're reading. Okay, so before we take a break, I want to move on to thinking about working at the word level, to advance language proficiency. What we've done so far is just talk about how to look at the unit, how to think about the unit, how to think about the unit text, and how to decide which text I'm going to read, how much of the text I'm going to read, how am I going to support the text, how much native language will I use to support the kids in understanding the concepts, and so forth. So I do want to have, that's like foundational to my thinking about the unit. And also I tried to show you other books I would add that Engage New York does not tell me to add, but I know I need to add to help the kids understand the unit. Picture books principally, or books with a lot of visual support that have to do with learning about the time frame of the novel. So when it comes to vocabulary, what I want to suggest to you is that you saw in the one page that I showed you from the novel that there's way too many words to teach. And I have to decide which of these words I'm going to teach. And then not only do I have topical words that I have to teach, words about the suffragette movement, but also I have to teach other types of words to kids because it's an ELA class and there's ELA vocabulary. And then there's also generic academic vocabulary. So one of the things, and this was on the Padlet, one of the things that I might do is look at the kinds of words that are topic related. I can talk about across all the books that I'm reading: women's rights, equality, equal, demanding your rights, giving speeches. These are words that are going to come up a lot. I'm not going to teach all the words on that list at once. It's very helpful if I color code the words so that I can be certain that I'm not just teaching nouns and I'm not just teaching adjectives, but that I'm also teaching possessives. I'm also teaching verbs. And here, you know, they were fined, not they are fined. So there's a multiple meaning word. And then the kids can write those words in alpha boxes to keep track of them. These would be their topic related vocabulary, but just writing them down doesn't do anything to get them into the student's repertoire. So I want you to be considering, all right, I identified the words, but that's only step one. Now, how am I going to give practice so that the kids are using the words, not just having them list the words or record the words and never get them into their own system? I want these words to come out of them without any prompting. I want them to start using these words because I've made them use them so much through activities that we've done that now they're in them. So I would use again and again and again, what was Susan B. Anthony accused of? What did they accuse Chloe of? What did the parents accuse Violet of? What did Violet accuse her parents of? I would want accused to come up so much, not just me speaking it, but also when they answer me, oh, Violet accused her parents of throwing the letters away. Violet accused her parents of lying about the letters. I want them to start using that word accuse. Who got arrested? Why were they arrested? And I want them to use the word arrest as they're responding, right? So in the question answer process, I would let them know what words I'm looking for. And these words could be up on a word wall and so forth. And this is good for all the kids, right? When we're in this unit, not just my ELLs, but that's one thing. So these are some sample theme or topic related words. Never mind, I'm doing this for the 4th grade unit. What about your unit? What would be the words for your unit that are topic related vocabulary that you would draw from all of the text across all of the videos that you're going to show? It doesn't just come up once, it comes up a lot, and will push kids further. And then I want to make sure that they see all of the forms of the word. So they see courage and they see courageous and they see courageously and so forth. Also, I want to teach them collocations, which is just a fancy word for frequently, words that frequently appear together, like pass resolutions or suffer discrimination or unequal treatment and so forth. So sometimes I want to teach them bundles, words that always travel together. And so when you teach vocabulary, don't just think single word, and also think about offering alternatives, abolitionists or suffragists. You know, they were trying to abolish that women couldn't vote. They were in the suffrage movement, they were suffragists and so forth. So I would want to make certain that as I go after these words, that I'm offering more than just the single word, but that I'm also figuring out, okay, now I've identified the words, how am I going to give practice? This is way too many words. How am I going to work on these words systematically, introducing a few at a time, maybe 6 at a time? And then by the end of the unit, this might be what I'm after. And maybe contentious isn't that important. I'll let that go. Maybe assemblage isn't that important. You're making all the decisions. You're in the driver's seat. I did want to show you Word Hippo. We've looked at this before, any of you who've been to other sessions that we've done. But I wanted to remind you of Word Hippo because in the 4th grade standard, and actually in all the grade level standards under the language standards, this is a very frequent standard across all the grade levels. Once kids are, let's say, 2nd grade and above, they want them to start consulting reference materials to determine the meaning of words. And so I could send them online. I could let them know about Word Hippo. And one reason I would like Word Hippo is because it offers translations in 99 languages for the word courage. So they could pull up in their language what courage means if they're still not understanding. It also shows them the word in sentences as a definition. It gives them synonyms. Here's some synonyms for the word courage. Remember, that's one of my goals with transitioning kids, is to get them to expand the words that they know and use. And it also offers them other forms of the word. So courageously, courageous, not just courage. Okay, so I would like all of you, if you've not been to Word Hippo, to go there. Think about how you could use it in your unit, especially under this language standard. Now, that's topic vocabulary, but I also have ELA content vocabulary, such as character, setting, plot, figurative language, style, theme, symbolism. You know, these are the many, many terms that I have. So I put this on the Padlet for you. I have to also teach these literary terms and these reading terms to kids. So when am I going to do that? Because I want them to be able to talk about the setting of chapter 2 and the characters that we meet in chapter 2 and the plot in chapter 2 and so forth. When I teach character and trait, I also have to teach them words for character traits. So behind every literary term that I want to teach or ELA term that I want to teach, there's other words that they have to know in order for them to be able to talk about the setting. It was rural, it was a rural setting, it was an urban setting, it was in a city, it was in a town. You know, they need those other words too. So behind every set of words, there could be another set of words that you can think of that the kids will also need. But I do want to teach some ELA terms and reinforce them across my units. And then finally, I've shown this to you a lot, any of you who've been to the other sessions, because it's another goal of ours to start building academic vocabulary. And to do that, a list like Dee Gardner's list is very helpful. And so I also put this list on the Padlet, the whole list, 86 pages long. And here we would identify not just the word, but the whole word family. When I teach accept, I should teach acceptance, acceptable, acceptability, unacceptably. And of course, not all of these are appropriate for every grade level, right? So you do want to factor that in. This is what the full list looks like. It's on the Padlet, it's on the NYU website, and they're in the order of frequency. So in academic settings, we're always saying today we're going to study the novel, we're going to study how the author creates the characters, we're going to study the character Violet, we're going to study metaphors. We're saying that all the time. And when we teach study, the most high frequency academic word, we should teach studied, studiously, studious, and so forth. So we will always know the frequency of the words that come up here. So just wanted to show you that in case you haven't seen this list before. And when I looked in just one chapter, just pages 18 to 23, I found all these AVL words, academic vocabulary words, that were on that list. I bolded them for you because sometimes it was a different form of the word that was in the novel. But you can see the frequencies. So I might want to teach argue before I teach prefer, or I might say, well, they'll have more use for the word prefer than they do argue. So I have to decide the utility of the word, and I also have to decide which one is higher frequency, and they might hear it more when they go to any academic classroom. There will be fewer academic vocabulary words in a novel or in a piece of fiction than in a piece of nonfiction. That's understandable, because why would I expect a lot of academic vocabulary words to appear in the novel? There always will be some, but not as many as when I look at a piece of nonfiction. So when I look at this piece on Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, I'm going to see many more words. And then again, I'll see the frequency. So change is very high frequency, because I looked at those first two samples more than you did. Change came up in the kids' sample, so it's a word they already know. And then I might move on and teach involve, involvement, uninvolved, and so forth. So I'm the one making decisions which word to teach. But in every unit, or in every time I'm teaching vocabulary, I should have one or two ELA words and one or two AVL words that I'm trying to teach, not just topic words. So you can see how quickly kids can get buried in words. I want to choose very, very carefully, how many topic words I'm going to teach. I can do this chapter by chapter or section by section in any text that I'm reading. But I also want to be sure to teach some ELA vocabulary. That's my content of my ELA/ENL class. And I also want to teach that cross-curricular vocabulary. Okay, so before we move on, Maria, let's take some comments in the chat. And so anything that any of you want to write about organizing your unit for transitioning kids, such as adding books, thinking about how you'll go through the books that are part of the unit, or any of what we just talked about on choosing vocabulary and making sure that we look at all types of vocabulary that are in this graphic. So Maria, anything that you'd like to say back? Just anyone, if you'd like to add in the chat now, something that you're thinking or something that you want to know about.
Yes, somebody wants to know, would you include cognates in this word list as well?
Yes. Now, here's the deal with cognates. If you think they will recognize the cognate without you doing anything, I would skip over it because the cognate, they don't need to be taught it. But if you don't think they'll recognize that it has a cognate, then I would teach the cognate. Some kids actually need it to be pointed out though. So if kids are not noticing, oh, that's just like a word in Spanish, or that's just like a word in Haitian Creole, if they're not noticing yet, then we want to help them notice it.
Okay, somebody wanted something very practical. Where is our Padlet link?
Oh, well, that was right on the first slide.
What?
And maybe Antoine can throw that into the chat right now.
Yes,
And
D. Gardner's list is very long. What is the easiest way to find the words I need? Is there a site?
oh yeah, so this is why I gave it to you as a file, 86 pages. Oh my. Once you download it and you have it on your desktop with the find, F-I-N-D, with the find command, you can search. And at first it's going to feel tedious to you because you're going to look up suffragist and it's not going to be on the list. And then you're going to look up, I don't know, something else like train, petticoat. It's not going to be on the list. But over time, you're going to learn what kind of words are likely to be on the list, and you're going to get more skilled at looking for words. So, and you don't have to do it for every single chapter, right? But you want to use the search command. You want it to be mechanically searched. You don't want to do this with your eyeballs because it's 86 pages long. So I open the text, I start moving my finger along and I go, oh, I wonder if accuse is on the list. And then I type in the find, under the find command, I type in the word accuse and it comes up or it doesn't come up. Okay, so that would be the way that you would search for it. And it will get easier to use over time because you will start to have a good sense of what kind of words are likely to be on the list.
Okay, we want to reassure everybody that this the PowerPoint slide will be available to everyone. They're asking about that. But Nancy, somebody wants very general criteria for choosing the vocabulary words since there's so many.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. So we look at these are some of the things we look at. How high frequency is this word? Do I think that they will have chances to use the word? And do I think it's going to be frequently used when I'm teaching this unit? So frequency is one of the things that I would look at. Another thing that I would look at is utility. Just in their normal day, living their life as a fourth grader, since I'm modeling with fourth grade, or as a first grader, or as an eighth grader, do I see them other places in their day being able to maybe use this word? So frequency is one thing, which is why that list that's organized by frequency is helpful. Utility, and then the need for that word, like it's obligatory. Fred Genesee calls it content obligatory. I cannot talk about the women's movement without saying movement, women's and movement, or amendment. Like it's not that, I'm not usually talking a lot. It's not very high frequency for me to be talking about amendments, but in this unit, I am going to be talking about amendments to the Constitution. So sometimes it's very specific to the topic that I'm teaching that I must teach it. It's obligatory. They won't understand the novel. They won't understand what they're reading if I don't teach them this word. So I hope that will be helpful.
Well, and here's another one, a request to know whether if you know of a visual vocabulary site for special need ELLs in lower grades.
Yeah, when we're on the break, there's a visual thesaurus is one thing I can think of the top of my head. There's a lot of Pictionaries online for ELL kids. So if you put in the word Pictionary in a Google search and the word kids, Kids, sometimes you'll pull them up. So look for visual thesaurus, look for Pictionary for kids, and you should find some sites, but I'll try to find a couple while we're on break and post them. But it is time for break. and I'm aware that you need a break. I know that in this first segment, I did a lot of talking. I am going to try in the next segment that we go through together to have us be participating more, but I needed to get those foundations down before we move forward. So let's take a 10-minute break, and I'll see you at 10:40. I'm going to give it one more minute just to let people come collect again.
Nancy, somebody also asked about an academic word list in Spanish. Can you address that?
Why don't I hunt for that? And if we find anything, we'll send it out with the PowerPoint. I bet it exists. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. And while you were taking the break, I did hunt for some online picture dictionary and ELL sites. And don't use Pictionary. I told you to use Pictionary. Don't use it because it's going to explain the game Pictionary. Use online picture dictionary or online visual dictionary when you're hunting. And this is now part of the PowerPoint. So when we send you the PowerPoint, you'll have these links. But I do want to mention, if you just want one right away to take a look at, you can look at kidswordsmith.net, and that'll give you an idea of what these sites are like. But these are very helpful, not just, well, it's very helpful for entering, emerging, and transitioning kids. They might need to see pictures of things that could take a visual to show what they are. You know that some things are hard to show in a picture, but other words are easy to demonstrate in a picture. So remember that a picture dictionary is only helpful if it's kind of a concrete term that you can really show. But anyway, this is now part of the PowerPoint, and I will also fix that slide with the background knowledge where I must not have saved. I'll make sure that it's correct before it goes out to you. So let me get rid of this. And now we want to talk about language development activities, because like this little tree that's growing from a seed to a flowering, blooming tree, a very rich tree with all of its fruit, that's what we want to happen with our kids. And so now we want to think about how we're going to plan for these language development activities that are specific to transitioning students across our unit. I'm going to keep showing you with the fourth grade unit, but you're going to keep thinking about your unit, because I tried to make strategies that would apply equally well to all of your grade levels. Otherwise, it wouldn't be helpful. So one of the things that we can do is give kids a table like this where they list a noun in the right-hand position, like car. And then we would teach them to add descriptors ahead of it. And so again, by grade level, you can decide how many adjectives you would like to have. Over here on the left, you could have 3 columns, 4 columns, 5 columns, as many as you want. But then you would have the kids decide, well, which one goes first and which one goes second. So is it rusty old car, or is it old rusty car? And this is something that ELLs can't know. They can't know. You can't say to them, well, what sounds right? They don't know. They both sound right. So we have to help them know which one goes first and which one goes second. And so here, if they were in person and they were in the classroom, you could put them in pairs. They could have a mat like this, and they could work together to lay down their adjectives and see which one sounds right. And if I add old rusty Model T card, which goes first, which goes second, which goes third. And I actually found on BrainPop ELL a very helpful table. There is actually a rule about this, like which type of adjective goes first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. And I'm not recommending, even at the 8th grade, that you would include all of these in one descriptor, like beautiful, small, ancient, square, green, Chinese jade, teapot. Okay, that's too many adjectives. Nobody ever writes like that. But 4 is not uncommon, 3 is not uncommon, and then which goes first, second, third. Your analytic kids, especially the older the grade level, are going to love this table because they're going to like knowing there's a rule. We work by the rule, those of us that are proficient speakers, but we don't even know what the rule is. We just know what sounds right. And your kids will learn what sounds right too over time, but at the transitioning level, don't ask them, well, what sounds right? Because they don't know. They're new to English. Okay, so then we have to teach them. And obviously some of these are more frequent, like size and shape and color and purpose. These are more frequent types of adjectives. So work with those. You don't have to do every column. And I can draw right out of chapter 2 on 3 pages. I found all of these multiple adjectival phrases. So I could actually use phrases from the novel. I could take out navy, blue, and pleated, and that's what could be on this chart, navy, blue, and pleated. And then they could decide, well, which one goes first, second, third. And so indirectly, I'm having them work with this heavy description. And by the way, in your novels, there is always a ton of this descriptive language because that's what makes novels beautiful. So even picture books, a lot of this in picture books. So I don't care if you're 1st grade or 8th grade, you're going to find a lot of this language in fiction texts, and you can pull it out and you can give kids a workout. So remember, we're trying to give them a workout and we're trying to show them how English works. This is very good work for transitioning students. Neither of the first 2 kids that I showed you were doing much modification. They really, really need this. Okay. Another thing I can do, remember I was trying to get them to use other verbs, not the everyday verbs. So I could also help them understand English has some regular verbs and some irregular verbs. This is a real pain, but it starts to be a real pain when kids are transitioning level. And so here I could have them do a word sort if they're in person or even if they're at home. I could have them do this. I could give them a whole bunch of words that are just helter-skelter. They could have 2 boxes that they have to throw the words into. And then they can show me how to, I don't have to call it regular and irregular. I can ask them, what if I was talking about yesterday? What would the word be? Wish to wished, like to liked, see to saw, give to gave, and so forth, right? So I don't have to use regular and irregular, but as you go up the grades, I could use it because I want to show them, oh, look at English, isn't it fun? It has all these irregular verbs and you have to know which is which. You can't say gived, seed, sitted, right? And so, and kids will say that at first, won't they? Because they're overgeneralizing. So I could do a word sort. I can do that virtually or I can do it in person. But then I want to ask them to make sentences or give thoughts or give ideas that happen, retell a story event with that verb. Like Violet wished her mother would have given her the letters. Violet wanted to, Violet left on a train to go to Tennessee. Okay, so I can have them retell story events, but using these verbs in order to give practice. And you can do this with your books too. So you're giving them language practice transitioning kids need, but you haven't left your novel. And this is a chapter that I would have read intensively with them, not just one I would have summarized briefly and then moved on. Another thing I can do is write a paragraph in the present tense, summarizing chapter 2 as if it happens. It's happening as we're reading the chapter. Ooh, she sneaks out of the house and she's taking her savings with her and she buys a train ticket. It's happening right now. And then I can ask them to write it as if it already happened before we go to chapter 3. So why don't you right now in your head, change this paragraph that I have in brown, change it to the past tense quickly in your head. Okay, and so here you can see I have a challenge because here to change this one, I have to say Mrs. Renwick, who asked why she was traveling alone. Violet told her she was going, right? So they have to understand the contraction and everything. So I can make this challenging for them. And hopefully you saw just by doing it in your head that there were regular and irregular verbs right in here. And so look at how short the paragraph is, and I can still give them a lot of practice with verbs. And they haven't left the novel. Now, is Engage New York telling me to do this? No, because they didn't write the unit for ELLs. They adapted the unit for ELLs afterwards. They wrote the unit for native speakers. And I have to add this practice if it's going to happen because I'm the ENL teacher. And there has to be time for this, which means I might not read every chapter intensively. There's 19 chapters. Transitioning kids can't read them all in the same amount of time because they're too demanding. So I'm going to read certain chapters intensively. I'm going to summarize others. I'm going to skip some maybe even and just tell them what happened. So I'm deciding all of that. So that's to work on the word level, but with verbs. Now I can work with any of Elfriede Hebert's generative word strategies. I love her work. I'm always sending you to her work. This is her website, textproject.org. And I'm going to show you with our novel how I could use 4 of her strategies. So a first strategy that she wants us to do as teachers is to teach either multiple parts of speech, such as we had the word earlier, if you can remember, I pointed out the word fine, not I'm fine today, rather they fined the women for voting. And so I could teach them, it could be a verb or it could be an adjective. I can teach them multiple meanings of words, right? So here's how I would do that with my 4th grade unit. And here I took the picture book that I added. And here they would have, I took all of these words from this picture book, which I would have read with them because it's a picture book. It's going to give them good support. And then I can ask them for 2 meanings of the word right. Okay, because I want them, they hear all the time in class, oh, that's right. Yeah, you're right. Well, that's not quite right, right? We're always saying that to kids, but now they have to understand right another way, that social studies way. So take another one of these and see if you can figure out 2 meanings of the words. And I'm going to ask you to just think it in your head. So hopefully you saw, I can go to the state fair. It's not fair. I can state my name. She lives in the state of Tennessee. Okay, so all of these have at least 2 meanings and some have more. And when kids are transitioning, I should be doing Elfriede Hebert's generative word strategy 3, which is to teach the multiple meanings and the multiple forms of words, such as I'm fine, I'm going to fine you 10 cents for coming late to class. Her generative word strategy 4 is just like that academic vocabulary list. It's to teach word families, not just single words. So if I'm going to teach these words, I should teach at least one other form of the word. And because transitioning kids are not using a lot of adjectives and adverbs, that's the other form I'm going to teach them. Okay, she gave comfort to Myrtle. Myrtle wasn't comfortable. Okay, and so I'm going to take events from this novel and I'm going to teach the main word and at least one other form of the word, but I'm going to be very purposeful. I'm going to teach a form that I know transitioning kids are not using. It's not in their writing naturally. And so I always give you this on the Padlet. I always give you this handout because this is how you transform words into another word form, how I can make from a verb a noun, how I can make a verb from a noun, how I can make adjectives. These are the suffixes, how I can make adverbs. This is the main suffix and so forth. So this is just, we would want kids to start to realize how to do this. This is how English works, how I can transform a word that is a verb into a noun, how I can, and so forth and so on. You get it. So generative word strategy 5 is for me to teach other words, synonyms for words that are in the text. So if I'm going to teach, she tucked the letter inside of her, I forget where she tucked it, her waistband. She inserted the letter, she pushed the letter, she unfolded the letter, she put it inside. Okay, I'm going to teach them other ways of saying something. Now, this doesn't turn out to be an important word, but compromise is, okay, and maybe find, she found her sister, she located her sister, she tracked down her sister, she discovered where her sister was. And so I'm going to take a word that I know to be important across the whole book, and I am going to teach other words that mean the same thing. Why? Because you saw with those initial 2 samples, the kids use the same word over and over and over and over and over and over. Vote, 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 women, 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 women. They don't have another word. So we have to teach them other words. And this is extremely important work for transitioning students, to offer them other words. Word Hippo can help you, right? That's why I showed you that. So word strategy 6, the 4th strategy I wanted to show you in relation to this text, is how to teach words in a topical manner related to the book. So here's everything in this unit, everything in this module that we're trying to learn about: the 19th Amendment, the suffragist movement, who the suffragists were, what kind of activism they engaged in, that they were working for the right to vote, that by the end at the 19th Amendment, Black women still didn't have the right to vote. And so they had to keep going. So, but we won't stop at words because these are transitioning kids. So it's fine. I want them to know all this. This has to do with what they're learning, the concepts that they're learning, but I want them to take it to a sentence level. So I want them to take what's in this bubble and I want them to write some sentences for it. Okay. Or you don't have to use the word sentence. You could say some ideas. Write down some ideas and write it down in a whole thought. Okay, give me the whole thought. And so here, they're not just going to end with this, they're going to take it to a longer level. That's the work of transitioning, not just single words. So don't be happy with your graphic organizers when they fill it out with words. They're transitioning kids. They should take it to a sentence level. Okay, so this is how you get them to use the word. And then you can say, oh, I love what you wrote. Please read it out loud, Marta. I want everyone to hear what you wrote. Now she's speaking it, because that's just what I want. I want her to say it many times. And read it to your partner, say it to your partner. So you get the idea. So here, the idea I want to get across to you is don't stop with your webs at a word level. They're transitioning kids. Take it to a sentence level. So a final thing we want to do to help them is they're going to have to start to use context clues because I cannot teach them every word. And so I love to send you to this website. This is the website of Tan Huynh, and he's an ELL teacher par excellence. He has a website called Empowering ELLs, The Guy Must Never Sleep. And he talks about 5 steps for teaching ELLs to use context clues, which are, first, I got to pre-select some words, and in my text, there's only so many words that actually offer clues. So I have to do this as a setup. I have to find the words that actually have clues that I can use for teaching purposes. I have to notify the kids of what word I want them to decipher. I have to send them to the text to search for clues. I have to have them annotated by highlighting, underlining, circling, and connecting the clues back to the word. Then we engage in a discussion. Oh, how did you know that might be the meaning? And then I want them to understand that the strategy that I just taught them is called using context clues. And when you find a word you don't know, see if you can find a context clues and make a guess. And in the end, it's just a guess. And then I thought these would be useful. Again, this is from Tanhuan's site. This is a poster he's created that we could have up on the wall for kids or in their notebooks. And then this is another great one that comes from Vocabulary, which by the way is no longer free because they put it into Nearpod. Now they make you pay for it. But here, when it was free, they were saying usually these are the types of clues: synonyms, antonyms, explanations, and examples. So this we will practice. So here are some words that I found in chapter 11. And I want you to find one among these four. See if you can find one or more that use an explanation, not a synonym, not an antonym, but an explanation, not an example, an explanation, and put it in the chat box. And you don't have to write the whole sentence. You can just write 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. Okay, and so just put your answer into the chat box, and in a minute, I'll show you which ones were, in my mind, explanations. Okay, so let's take a look. So the first one you could argue is synonyms too, because they say horribly hot. But I think it's better as an explanation: too hot to move. Okay, so it was really explaining what sweltering is. The accommodate one was a little more indirect, but indirectly it was saying you can't go in the grill room because it's just for gentlemen. But if you go to the dining room on the main floor, they can accommodate you. So now you have to guess that accommodate means you're allowed to go there, right? And this one was more examples, the types of things that were done to bribe people, the people that were against women being allowed to vote, the antis. And then the final one was kind of a description of when something is wilted, what happens to it, but it was a bit of an explanation. So you're the one deciding how you're going to label these. And it's best when you're teaching context clues to kids for it to be really, really clear that it is an explanation, that it is a synonym, that it is an antonym, and so forth. But hopefully you got one of these. So many of them could be called explanation, except this one. I didn't think this was an explanation. I thought this was more examples.
Most of our participants chose 1.
Yeah, it's a perfect one. This is this is really strong for teaching because there's so many clues. And so we want to start with one that's so obvious that kids will understand what they're to do. And then we pull back to ones that are more and more distant as they gain skill in using context clues. But you're selecting them, so select a good one. Okay, so now we've gotten to the end of the things we can do at the word level. Antoine, it's time for our poll. I listed 8 things in the poll, and we want you to check 3 things that you want to do more of to advance transitioning kids' proficiency at the word level. Pick 3 of them. Which 3 would you like to do more of?
And I just want to let everybody know, you can scroll down for more options.
Okay, so you can do this. I was very wordy. That's what it's teaching me. So be sure to scroll down because you can only pick 3. So read them all and then pick 3 that you'd like to do more of. I'll give you 1 more minute.
It's not allowing me to scroll.
Yeah.
It isn't?
No.
Okay, well, sorry, then you'll have to pick from the top.
If you have a mouse that has a scroll bar, could you try that?
Don't have a mouse, and it's still not allowing me to scroll.
Well, pick
That's
two
fine.
from the top then. You're only missing two. Let me see if I can help you this way.
You should have 8. I mean, so if you have 8, you're fine. Because all I got to do was press the down arrow twice, and it was okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to have to end the poll in a second, so do the best you can. And I apologize to those of you that are having the technical issues. I was too wordy, as usual. Okay, and so in another 30 seconds, Antoine, if you can show how people answered.
Okay, Nancy. Okay, Nancy, I just ended the poll.
And thank you. Okay, so this shows that a lot of you want to work on context clues. It's hard work, people, and it's good work. So I'm so happy you're going to work on that. A lot of you are going to work on teaching words in families, multiple meaning words, converting text from present to past tense for practice and so forth. Great. So every answer was right? But you can see that a lot of you, what many of you chose, like I would say maybe those multiple meaning words and synonyms and the context clues, but be thinking about this, like you should be doing different things when you're teaching vocabulary, not always the same thing. So I was trying to offer you different options of what you can do when teaching vocabulary. So you could say, well, what haven't I done in a while? And then you can go there. Okay, so let's continue. And now we want to move on to thinking about supporting reading comprehension and connecting reading comprehension to the writing that makes up a part of our units. And so I have shown you this list that you're about to see many times. This is the original website for it. And they break metacognitive reading strategies that we can teach kids into 3 categories of global, it helps you all the time, problem solving, it helps you when you're not understanding, and support strategies, it gives you a boost when you need it. And these are the key metacognitive strategies that our ELLs need to know and to use, and we should be working on these. So I am always reminding you of these because this is work we should be doing, and definitely with our transitioning kids. So just to show you a few that I could work on with as global reading strategies for this unit or any unit that has a chapter book, I can, remember, it has no picture. So I can set a purpose for reading. We can obviously work on prediction, and I can also help them with text structure. So one of the things that was part of this unit, and I always want to grab things from the unit so I don't have to do anything, I can just use what's there. I liked this activity, which was designed as an assessment actually, but I could use this for predicting or setting a purpose for reading, because the only picture that exists in this novel is on the front cover, and then the back matter that teaches them the history of the true events. And so here, the questions are, who do you think is depicted on the cover? Who do you think those people are? Why is this person crossing her fingers? What do you think this person would be hoping would happen? And why is this person holding a yellow rose? And then you could ask other questions like, why are they in front of the White House? Why are they in this clothing? You know, there's a lot of things I could ask as they get started. And before you do a chapter book, if the only picture that exists is the cover, you should be doing something with it. Another thing I could do is use the text structure, because we know from research that when kids can identify, when ELLs and kids with language-based learning disabilities can identify the text organization principles, they comprehend better. So if they know, oh, this is going to be told step by step by step, or event by event by event, chronologically, if they can detect that, and if they can record as things happen where it belongs on a timeline or in a chart, they will comprehend better. So I certainly could do that as a global strategy, have them use a timeline as we read to place important story events in the context of the suffragette movement. And so they could add the novel of the actual events underneath and the novel events above. Okay. And that, some people call that a fishbone. It's a timeline, but it's a fishbone because things are going up here and things are going down there, because you're profiling two different narrations, one the historical events and the other as things occur in the novel. Another way I could use a timeline is to support this comprehension of the biography of Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And so this is told chronologically when she was born to when she died and what she did in between. And I could use a timeline to have the kids capture this. And I wanted to remind you, a lot of you are using Padlet, that there is a timeline on Padlet. So why not have them do the timeline as a Padlet activity? All the kids could have their own Padlet. They could create a timeline as they're reading. They could discuss it with other kids. They could see if they have things in the same place and so forth. And I could also use a shelf or a wall or a grid as a vocabulary notebook. As they add more words and maybe words and pictures, they could add it to a Padlet that I've set up for the text that they're reading. So another thing that I wanted to show you, because Marie Bastian of New York City Department of Ed, Brooklyn, South Borough office, told me after last session that actually you can record on Padlet now, and I was unaware of that. So I just want to play a bit of this so that all of you can be aware that, guess what, you could have kids record right in Padlet. And thank you, Marie.
Hi, I'm Richard Byrne. In this video, I want to show you a new feature of Padlet that allows you to record your voice and save it in a Padlet note. So let's go ahead and see how it works. Double click on the wall and you'll see this More menu. And from there, you can choose all kinds of options, including a new voice recording option. Allow your microphone. And you can see here, we can have a recording of up to 15 minutes. Just hold it down. And now we're recording. And I can talk about whatever I'd like to for the next 15 minutes. This could be a great way to have students make little audio reflections on a lesson. It could be a good way to have short podcasts. The options for using this are almost limitless.
Okay, and then he goes on to tell you how you would post and so forth. But I just want to go back to this part to show you that you can also upload a film, a video. They can make a video of themselves, or they could make a drawing if you wanted them to make drawings of certain vocabulary or events that happened. So all of this is now possible with Padlet. And thanks again, Marie, for pointing that out to me, because I didn't know it. So one of the things that we could do on a Padlet is we could upload any graphic organizer. Remember that a graphic organizer is a mediator between reading and writing. I should be using it as I'm reading to support my writing. And in the case of the text that I showed you, it's chronological text. And so they would be hunting for graphic organizers that match sequential or chronological, such as a timeline. I did post this on the Padlet because this shows you if my text structure is time order, use a graphic organizer like that. If it's comparison contrast, use the famous Venn. But that's not the only graphic organizer I can use. You can use a T-chart. There's lots of other comparison contrast graphic organizers. So I gave you a bunch of sites you can go to, and you should download these and organize them according to the text structures that you see over here. So you would have 6 files, And every time you have a new graphic organizer, you would say, well, where does that belong? What kind of text structure does that support? And you would throw it in there to give kids variety as they work with different graphic organizers to support their reading comprehension. The problem-solving strategies that I wanted to show with this novel are pause to reflect on reading and rereading. And so when they're reading this excerpt from the Susan B. Anthony speech, the original unit does ask them to write details like why did she vote when it was against the law. This is pause to reflect on reading, and they can reread as many times as they want to try to be able to answer this question. So again, I'm looking for unit writing activities that let me practice the metacognitive reading strategies. And you want to do that too. You want to look at these strategies and go, what's in my unit where I could let kids pause? It's asking them, in fact, to pause and reflect on reading. It's asking them to visualize. It's asking them to pay close attention. And so good, I'm working on that. Let me point out the strategy to kids while we do this, okay? When it comes to support strategies, I wanted to remind you that we always want our, when we get to transitioning, we want kids to start taking notes, underlining and highlighting, and they can do that mechanically on Immersive Reader, which is now a feature of Nearpod. And they can also do it with Google Read and Write. And if you're unfamiliar with how to highlight, it's highlighting that I want to stress to you. If you're unfamiliar of how to highlight with Google Read and Write or Immersive Reader, I gave you 2 videos down here that you can watch, and it's very straightforward. You won't have difficulty. So when kids are working remotely, they could still highlight. You could still see their highlighting. And so here we want to model the highlighting and also the summarizing. So another activity, and actually this is a standard activity that we can use for summarizing. The somebody in wanted but so then, hopefully you know this strategy, but this is part of grade 4 module 4. It's right in the unit. And I would definitely use this with my transitioning kids to get them to paraphrase or summarize what happened in chapter 1. The somebody was Violet in her house, wanted to read the letters, but her mother hid them. So when she found them, she had to take them to the Susquehanna River to read them. And then she hid them. And then it made her so mad, she left to go hunt for her sister. Okay, so they would summarize using this framework, and then they would write it over here. And this is perfect for transitioning. I could also, this is also from the unit, and it's every single chapter. They write a summary of the chapter as they're reading, and then after 6 chapters, they write a summary of what happened up to chapter 6. So this is teaching them progressive summarization, and it keeps going. And there's 19 chapters. Why do you think there's 19 chapters? I'll give you a minute to think about that. It's very cute that in this book, she created 19 chapters because of the 19th Amendment. And so here we could have kids progressively summarizing. This is a great tactic for all of you. And then after a bundle of chapters, they would summarize. Okay, there's another summarization one where they write the main idea for certain paragraphs. This is from the vote. They're only summarizing certain paragraphs. And after they summarize those paragraphs, then they write a summary of the text. So again, it's teaching 4th graders progressive summarization. And then finally, because this was a big objective of this module, we want them to see how the character actors contribute to the theme. So I would tell them these actions. Violet does this and Chloe does that, and Myrtle does this, and Violet and Myrtle do that. And what does that show? Does it show resisting stereotypes, breaking the rules, treating others with kindness? What is the theme? And so we only offer them a few themes, and then we see if they can figure out what the theme is. This is, again, teaching them how to identify the theme, which is tough, which is a tough thing to teach. And we could use sentence frames to support kids, right? And so again, this is another activity direct from the unit for summarizing the themes. And you could take a look at this later, but I was just trying to point out for you that I can hunt for writing activities in the unit that let me teach those metacognitive reading strategies, how to read successfully so you can write successfully. And then it does ask them to produce an essay. All of you have taught introduction, body paragraph, and conclusion. That's in there. And I'm showing it to you because this would be where I would work at the word level to teach them the connectives that they need to move from one sentence to the next, from one paragraph to the next. And so these are on the Padlet for you. And they're organized according to what am I trying to accomplish. Am I trying to illustrate a point or show an example? Am I trying to compare things? Then I'm going to use these words or these words. So it's teaching them by language function what word they might need to move from one sentence to the next or one paragraph to the next. And I would want to teach these words too, right? This is word level work. So let's talk a bit, we're going to move quickly now about some speaking activities that I could use for participating in class discussions. You know that when it comes to the speaking and listening objectives of most of our units, this is what they want, kids to participate in class discussions. And so I would want to frame my questions in ways that are appropriate for transitioning kids, which means I want to ask my questions in such a way that they have to give me a simple sentence or extended phrases. And I have to be ready with prompts in case I ask the question, what do you think will happen next? And they say, she'll leave. That's 2 words. No, I want more than that. So then I would want to ask them, well, how do you know? Or why did she want to leave? So I want to be ready with that next prompt to get a fuller response out of my transitioning kids. And to do this, I can offer sentence starters and sentence frames. I think all of us are familiar with this. The first one is a starter. I don't give them any help to end what they're going to say. The best part of the chapter was when they have to know the whole thing they're going to say here, but at least I know where they're headed because I've given them a stem. Whereas here, I've given them the whole sentence and all they have to do is add a word or words here and add a word or phrase here. Okay, and so if you would like to watch a nice video on the difference between starters and frames, I posted one for you. But I think all of us are quite familiar with stems and frames. But you should know why you're using them. This one offers more support. This one offers less support. I use this one when they're struggling to do something. I use this one when they just need practice. And so a place I can go to get more of the stems is the talk moves. I posted this chart for you. If you want to watch some videos on talk moves, these are moves kids can make in a class to talk, to enter the discussion. And so here's 2 videos you could watch. One is 5th and one is 8th. And I also wanted to offer you conversation starters. These are strips. These are 3 panels, the same, bounce, sum it up and inquire, bounce, sum it up and inquire. You would cut these into strips that kids could post in front of themselves, or you could put it on a word card for them, on a cardstock card for them, where they could just pull it out and use it. And there are bounce cards for primary and there are bounce cards for intermediate grades, and I posted them. But I mostly wanted you to know about this site called English Learners Success Forum, because you will find other great tactics on there to get kids to speak. And they had it in Spanish, so I put that for you too. And they say they have it in other languages, so you could see what languages they have it in by going to the site. And then from Nancy Motley's work, she says, make sure that you tell kids what you want to hear. I'm listening for suffragist. I'm listening for right to vote. I'm listening for, here's a stem. It should sound like this. So we should target the talk, tell them what we're listening for. And then she offers some ideas for how to get kids to target their talk. So now I want to show you briefly on Nearpod how kids could add audio. Like if you're doing this remotely, how you could get them to speak, any of the things we just looked at, but do it on Nearpod.
Hi, everyone. Today I'm going to show you how the audio for a student looks. So I am going to start a student-paced lesson that was launched by Michelle to show you all how I'm going to record an open-ended question that she asks all the students to answer. So here I am in my first and join lesson, and I'm just going to quickly go through the lesson. So we were supposed to watch this video, and after this video, there is a question. What is, explain ARMS. So there's an acronym in the video. So instead of typing my answer, which we all have done, some people who have used Nearpod in the past have asked the students to type their answer. They now have the option to record their answer. So I am going to record my answer for this question that was asked by the teacher to the students. ARMS means A, add sentences to words to expand meaning. R, remove unnecessary sentences and words. M, move paragraphs, sentences, and words for organization. S, substitute sentences and words with other sentences.
Okay, and then when you're done recording, you hit submit. So just wanted you to know it is possible, and we could use Nearpod to have kids ask a question or answer a question or practice vocabulary. So be thinking about that, how you could use Nearpod. And later you can look at this link and see how you could do this in writing with the Collaborate board. So it's very simple. I promise you, it's very simple how to use the Collaborate board. And instead of speaking, they write. They write on a sticky note and they post their sticky note, and they can add a picture to the sticky note. So some of you may already be using the Collaborate board, but this will help the rest of you if you'd like to. One of the things they could do is this language table for talking. I could have this as a file, and then kids could have to say in chapter 12, what was Violet doing? What was Chloe doing? What was Myrtle doing? What was Violet saying? What was Chloe saying? And you get the drill. But this is a way that I could offer kids a table to prompt them to speak. And then they can practice as many times as they want. And then they can submit once they're happy with what they're saying. Okay, somebody must have their sound on. Someone, okay, thank you. So another tool that we can use is Flipgrid, and most of you are familiar with Flipgrid and you're already using it. It interfaces well with Microsoft products and Google Classroom. And I'm showing you Flipgrid this time around because it's good for transitioning kids and up. And they can make videos, they can make recordings, they can post photos, they can personalize it. But if I were working at the lower grades, I would have them use Seesaw. So let me just mention, Seesaw is simpler, but it does the things that Flipgrid does. Okay, so hopefully all of you are using one or the other. If I were first or second grade or kindergarten, I would use Seesaw. If I were third, fourth, fifth, sixth and up, I could use Flipgrid. So let's just watch a minute of that.
Welcome to Flipgrid, a video discussion experience from Microsoft. In this video, we'll provide everything you need to know to get started as a student. First, you'll need to access your class topic. Click the link or enter the code you received from your educator on the free Flipgrid app or on any computer with a webcam via the Microsoft Edge or Google Chrome browser at flipgrid.com. Log into Flipgrid using your school account by clicking the Microsoft or Google login. Read the topic discussion prompt. You can click this button to launch Microsoft's Immersive Reader, which provides powerful reading assistance. Watch the topic media, explore any links, and then, when you're ready, click to add a video. Flipgrid's camera is filled with powerful tools to help tell your story. You can add a filter, frame, text, emoji, ink, and draw on a board. You can upload images or even videos from your camera roll. Record, review, and re-record as many times as you would like. You can screen record and stitch together multiple clips. When you're ready, click Next, snap a selfie, and then click Submit. Watch videos from your peers here, add text or video comments, and review feedback from your educator. And remember, you're incredible.
Okay, so it just keeps saying you're incredible. But what I want you to realize is I could give the kids this table as a file, and then I could ask them on Flipgrid or Seesaw to go ahead and record themselves saying all the things they learned in chapter 12. I'm checking on their comprehension, but I'm also getting them to talk. Okay, so we want to do things like that. And I would offer kids instructions of the technology in their home languages if I can. And I did find many for Flipgrid. I found Portuguese, Chinese, Korean, and Spanish. So now I'm going to show you very quickly, because I'm sure this will make sense to you right away, how I can help them work at a sentence level using mentor texts from my module texts, whatever they are. So with transitioning kids, I want to help them really build out their sentences. I want them to make their sentences more evolved and more complex. So I could start with a video like this.
Have you ever had trouble stretching a simple sentence? This video will probably help you a lot.
Let's start with a simple sentence such as the wolf howled.
How about adding some adjectives to wolf, like gray and fluffy? An adjective describes a noun. Now, the sentence is the gray, fluffy wolf howled.
Why don't we toss in some adverbs? Adverbs describe a verb and an adjective. One example of an adverb is loudly. Now the sentence is the gray fluffy wolf howled loudly.
Where did the wolf howl? Maybe on a cliff. When did the wolf howl? It could be at midnight.
Where and when are forms of prepositions. Prepositions are words that show position and direction.
Now, the stretched complete sentence is the gray fluffy wolf howled loudly on a cliff at midnight.
By adding adjectives, adverbs, and prepositional phrases, you can stretch your sentences and make them a lot more interesting.
Thanks for watching.
Okay, so isn't that cute? That's the kids made the video, obviously. And hopefully you noticed that as they added words, they color coded the words, and color coding is really good to do to help kids understand the different places where certain types of words go. Like, where do I put the blue words? I don't have to necessarily call them adjectives and adverbs, although as you grow up the grades, we probably should. And so I don't want to do it with wolf though, right? So, okay, the problem with this video is it's all about wolves and my unit has nothing to do with wolves. So I would rather do it with sentences that have to do with my theme. So I'm staying on the theme, but I'm doing the language development. So I'm going to show you how I could take just one segment of text from this picture book, and I could show kids how to add replace the verbs or add prepositional phrases or combine sentences and so forth. This is important work for our transitioning kids. So notice that the blue text was the original. That's all it said. Elizabeth Cady became Elizabeth Cady Stanton and had children, cooked meals, washed dishes, mended clothes, and did laundry. That's what it said. So even though it's kind of stretching things and not that natural, I would show them all the places where I could add descriptive words, okay? And maybe I wouldn't show this many, maybe I would show a few less, but I did want to show you on Word Hippo and Wordsmith, I could find words. So if kids said something like, I don't know, a lot, I could have them say, oh, you write a lot. Why don't you see if you can find other words for a lot? And then they could go and hunt for other words for interesting adjectives. Likewise, I could show them how to add adverbs, and not all adverbs, as you well know, end with ly. So I could show them the kinds of words like afterwards, now and again, soon. These are the kinds of words that are adverbs because they're modifying when something happened. When did she become Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and so forth. Now, this is where my thesaurus would really help me, is to get rid of those everyday verbs And you might not agree that these are everyday verbs, but I think look is, and was is, and went is, and I want them to start replacing those. So I would take something from, I'm showing them, hey, look, the author used everyday verbs. Let's help the author out. And then we would find those other verbs, right? So this is something that I gave you the link to. I gave you the link for both of these. These are 50 very common verbs in English, and I want to get rid of them. I want my transitioning kids to move beyond these and to start to have, it's great that they know 50 verbs, but let's help them know a few more, because it's not going to make their English look very proficient if they're always saying is and are and go and get and give. And this poster I thought was cute. It's just other words for the word say or said. And so here's where I would add the prepositional phrases. I'm sure by now you're getting the drift of this. So I want them to see all of the many ways that they could make their passage better. And for those first two students that we looked at, I could show them how they could dig this right out of the text that they were reading and make their sentences even more interesting to read. So a final strategy that I could show them is how to combine these 4 sentences into one. And so how could I take these simple sentences? You might say, well, this is not a simple sentence, but still, I could teach them the sentence combination or sentence combining, which if any of you did the WITSE, you know that's a WITSE strategy. But here we have sentence combining, which is yet another way. So what would I do? What conjunctions would I use? What relative clauses would I use to be able to add all of these into one long sentence? And you can practice with that later if you like. But to do it, I'm going to need conjunctions. And so I gave you the link to all of these 3 types of conjunctions: subordinating, coordinating, and correlative. Okay, and so I want you to think now and add into the chat, what could you do more of? What are you not doing enough of that you could do more of with transitioning ELLs? And Maria, we have to go rapidly now because I'm determined to get them to practice using the checklist.
Okay, we're ready. Let's get those ideas. What do we need to do more of? Advanced combining sentences.
Yeah, that's really good. I hope you don't think they're using adverbs. They're not transitioning kids.
Somebody said adding adverbs. Teaching the parts of speech, adding adjectives and adverbs. I love the revising text idea with adding different parts of speech, switching sentences, stretching sentences, prepositional phrases.
All of it, right? We have to do all of it. So
replacing verbs.
Yes, replacing verbs is super, super important. I really want to urge you to do that. I would say replacing verbs, in my mind, is equally important to combining sentences, equally, because they don't know enough verbs. Your kids use the same verbs, I promise you. Look at their writing when you get back with them. They use the same verbs over and over. Okay, so one of the things that this unit asked us to work on with 4th graders was to add complexity with relative pronouns and relative adverbs. This is really a good target for transitioning kids, and I'll show you what it looks like within the unit. So this is the explanation from the chapter. I gave you the link. And here's some of the things that we could ask them to do. First, we could ask them to just arrange a sentence, taking 3 parts and then deciding what goes first, what goes second, what goes third. So in this case, it's Mr. Martin was wrong. There was not one hotel in Nashville that would take a white man and a colored child. They use the word colored in the novel because that was the term at the time. And here we could start with just them arranging the sentence, not making them decide which relative pronoun they should be using. But then it has them decide, do I need who, do I need which, do I need that, do I need whom? And so these are sentences from the novel, and they have to decide which relative pronoun. So this again is teaching them sentence complexity with relative clauses. They can do it with relative pronouns or relative adverbs. So here, they would have to decide, do I need where, do I need when, do I need why? So Violet had longed for the time she would be reunited with Chloe. It's not where and it's not why, right? So they have to decide which one fits in the blank. And then you could talk about it, how they could know which one was right. But this is good work to do with transitioning kids. So I'm not going to make you put it in the chat, but just think it, because I'm determined to get you to a final activity. But do you really need to work on expanding sentences, combining sentences, or adding relative clauses? I would tell you this is dependent on your student. So if you see they're not even expanding their sentences, that's what you should work on before having them combine sentences for complexity. And why am I doing relative clauses if they're not doing these first things? So these are kind of in the order I should be adding them in to mini lessons for my student. Okay, so as a final activity, I do want you to have a chance to use a checklist. And for those of you that didn't go to the Padlet and you didn't download the handouts, I'll come back to this page, but you're still going to be in trouble because you needed not only the 2 samples and to choose one to review, but you also needed the checklist. So if you can do it quickly, like download the checklist from the Padlet and download the samples. Otherwise, you'll have to watch what the other people who did download all the handouts are doing. But what I want all of you to do, this was called 2 Students Exercise. It was called 2 Students Exercise, and both samples are there for you. And then there was the language development checklist for transitioning students. So while you're getting that organized, I'll tell you that I studied at least the 10 to 12 samples that I collected from Rhode Island kids that are at the transitioning level. Remember, how I got those samples. It had to do with this unit. And then I found that over and over, these were things that kids needed help with at a word level. And that over and over, these were things that kids needed help with at a sentence level. But I also created this empty box so that if you found something that your kids need help with all the time, you could add it in. Certainly this checklist is meant to be revised and modified to work well in your classroom. If you choose student 1, I'm going to give you certain things to look for at the word level and the sentence level. And if you choose student 2, I'm going to give you certain things to look for at the word level and at the sentence level, okay? So if you choose sample 1, I want you to look at the word level at number 2, number 8, and number 9.
This is the checkers game where grandson and granddad will bond.
I'm sorry. Okay, and if you're at the sentence level, I want you to look at 8, 10, and 11 and see if the kid needs help with that. If you're looking at sample 2, I gave you 4 things to look at the word level and only 2 to look for at the sentence level. But both of you have 6 things to look for. Is everybody understanding the activity? Okay, so here's the samples, and I can't leave these both on simultaneously. So I'm going to have to leave this on so that you know what to look for. Okay, so please download the 2 students exercise, choose a sample, and only look for one of them, sample 1 or sample 2. Okay, so if everybody would please do that, and I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Okay, so there's 1 more minute. If you were very speedy, you might be able to look at both samples. Okay, so now everyone got to try out the checklist, and I did try to choose things that you would find the student doing or trying to do, but still needing help with. But what I'd like you to do now is, whoops, shoot, that went quickly, didn't it? I would like you to go to this answer garden, which you can scan the QR code. And I would like you to answer the question, what do you like or not like about having a checklist to find what you could work on with transitioning kids? So the question is, what do you like or not like about having a checklist? And I'll leave this up for 1 more second so that you can either go to Answer Garden and type in this number or scan this QR code. Okay, is anybody typing? I'm not seeing anything on the Answer Garden.
I'm typing. It only gives you 32 characters though.
Oh yeah, that's sorry, 40, you have 40 total characters, it's true. So what do you like? You have to make it short and sweet, a tweet, even less. Has someone hit the submit button?
Yes, I did, but it's not showing.
No,
Mine,
that's not-
mine either, but
Oh, they're not showing? Okay, let's try this. Oh, there they are.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Okay, it makes it easy to identify targets. I like the structure. I like that it keeps you focused. Right. Ideas laid out, clear feedback for the student, actions. It's really for the teacher, right? It's for you to notice things. And that's why I really want you to modify it. Like your kids are going to do other things that weren't in my samples. And so I created it around, I wanted to have enough samples that I thought it would have some validity, but you're going to find other things. And maybe you work all with Bangla speakers, and maybe they do some things that Spanish speakers don't do. So you want to keep modifying it and adapting it, but I wanted to give you the idea that with transitioning kids, you want to work at the word level and you want to work at the sentence level. Okay, so thank you for playing along, those of you that were able to get to the answer garden. Okay, so now we have come to the point that we're thinking about final details here. And so I want to show you some resources that I collected for you. Remember that the Padlet is there for you. All the handouts are there for you. Please download everything. We will send you the PowerPoint. I will be adding the background. I will be fixing the background knowledge one. If I find an academic word list in Spanish, which I believe must exist, I will try to add that in, or we'll add that as a note and send it out to you. But one of the things that we, let me get rid of this. These are the things that we've either talked about or actually looked at today. These are all things that you could be using effectively with transitioning students when they're working remotely. And don't forget about the audiobooks and the video read alouds, the book talks. All of these things are needed by our transitioning student. They need visual support, they need audio support, they need for us to modify things for them still. Transitioning is not very developed. They're just getting started at the sentence level. They have so much work to do. And so we really want all of these things to be supporting us when we're working remotely with the students. We want them to use them for support, and we want to use them. We can record on here, they can record on here, they can record on Vocaroo, right? We need all these things. And I just use Answer Garden briefly with you, but I can use that with kids when they're answering and I'm asking questions and they're answering, or I just want to get their ideas. And then I'm getting more input of what I can work on with them. So now, let's think about if you are teaching this unit, some of you are fourth grade teachers, maybe you're done with this unit. These are some resources for you should you be teaching this unit. Maybe you're fifth grade now and next year they make you fourth grade and you're going, oh shoot, I should have listened better. But all of us switch around sometimes. I found 2 more videos on stretching sentences. They're here at the end for you to watch later in case you like them. The failure of all of these videos is that they don't relate to our unit. So it would be better if you made a video or your kids made a video that did relate to the unit. So you're still talking about the 19th Amendment. And this is about sentence variety, which is a little different than stretching sentences. Okay, so these are there for you. And so that's it. Now I wanted to leave time for final questions. And so let me get out of here and go to all of you. And also this is the time that we remind you about the CTLEs.
Well, one of the questions is, if I may, is the checklist. They're wondering if it also comes in the entering levels.
No, I worked on the reason that it's not there for entering and emerging is actually because I don't think you need a checklist at the entering and emerging level because they're not writing very much. Remember that entering is using their native language a lot, and they're also responding in single words. So there's not a lot to look at. And I shouldn't be working on expanding anything. They're just trying to get their idea across. And entering is using phrases and just starting to use simple sentences. So what I would tell you, if you didn't come last time, just the way I started today for transitioning, where I said, what should we be working on? I did that for entering and emerging last time, and those PowerPoints are available. If you weren't able to come last time, we have the recording and we have the PowerPoint, and you could make your own little checklist of what you should be working on with entering and emerging. But the reason I created a checklist for transitioning is because they are starting to write sentences and there are things to be looking specifically for because now they're doing more with language. So I think you do need a checklist starting at transitioning, whereas below transitioning, I think you just need general marching orders, if that makes sense to you, just kind of generic marching orders. So I should be doing this with entering. With entering, a lot of the time they're using native language. To participate at the 8th grade level, they're using a lot of native language and they're just using single words. So I don't need a checklist. I just need to know what to do to stretch them to the phrase level. Okay, so I'm not resisting making a checklist. I don't think it would be useful.
All right, they're also wondering about accessing the entering and emerging previous PD. Antoine, you want to speak about that?
All of our PDs are on the website. You have to go to the language Arburn and you can actually look at numerous amount of workshops that Nancy has done and you can actually see them. Anything we do, send you, is also available on the language Arburn website. Antoine, can you please put it on the link on the chat and maybe they can copy it again. It's usually in your invitation.
Yes.
We want to help you. So all of you know that you have fabulous people working at the New York City statewide Arburn. You have all of those consultants available to you. So just contact them. And we all want to help you. We're doing all of this because we're trying to be we know how rough it is. It's rough right now. All of you are exhausted. And so we're trying to offer these sessions to give you tools and strategies and ideas and actual resources that we think might help you. And we're hoping so much might help you in the classroom.
We were just alerted also that on our website, we have upcoming events. So look at that chart as well for the workshops we planned for the last 3 months of this school year. It's a very extensive PD calendar for us.
And now if someone would explain the CTLEs.
So the CTLE, I have asked everyone to please put their information on the website. If you requested CTLE or if you forgot to request CTLE, and Clotilde and Jessie, who are on Clotilde is not with us today, but Jessie's online with us today. They will be sending you the CTLE, give them about a week to send you the CTLE. If you don't receive the CTLE by the end of the week, please send us an email, Xiomara, myself, or Clotilde, or Jessie, if you can put your email on the chat, and they can send you a notice, okay?
Okay. So everyone, I promise you, I do read the chat. I have Antoine send me the chat afterwards. If there's something specific to you, and certainly if you want to respond, you have to tell me how to contact you, but we do look at that afterwards. We love getting your feedback. It helps us shape the next event to try to make it as helpful as possible. And so we have 2 minutes left if there's any final questions, and we will end on time. You can turn your mic on now if you would like, if there's something you want to ask, or you want to share. Maybe you want to share something.
I just, excuse my voice. I just want to share a little bit about the CTLE hours. Make sure that in your logging in today, your name is the exact name of where the CTLE goes. Only because if we try to send a CTLE credit to somebody that says Mickey Mouse as your name, it's not going to go there. The address, I will give you the address for your questions about CTLE. It's ctle-arburn@nyu.edu. I will post that into the chat room for you.
So seeing no further questions, I just want to thank all of you. We all want to thank you. We know how busy all of you are. For you to have given up this morning, we so appreciate it. It shows the kind of professional that you are. And we really want to be whatever support we can be to you. We think you're doing fantastic. Obviously, this is the marker that you're doing fabulous work, working so hard for your kids. So thank you so much for everything that you do every day. It's wonderful for me to sit over here and have all these strategies. I don't see one kid. So you're the ones that matter. It's you who matter. You're the front line. You're the ones doing the hard work. And we want to support you. And certainly all of us together have a lot to share. Thanks again for being here today, and we hope to see you another time. And we're going to end now. The Arburn staff, we do stay on because we like to do a debrief right away afterwards. But if you have any further needs, please put them in the chat. We'll try to respond to you.